We're really lucky here in Wyoming. I come from Germany where you just look at a plant too long and you get a ticket, because it's verboten. You can't, there's so many people there, of course you can't wildcraft.
Here we have Osha, we have Arnica, Sweet Cicely. Oh, we have Yarrow.
My great-grandmother showed me herbs. They've been kind of part of my life for a long time. So this beautiful plant is called Burdock. The root of this is what we usually use. You can use the leaves as well.
My grandmother talked about going in the mountains and gathering things. And they were putting up food and medicine at the same time.
So in Wyoming you can wildcraft. That means to go out, look for a plant community and collect a few plants and then take them home, dry them or make yourself a tincture or a salve. It's a creative, wonderful way of connecting yourself to the green universe.
Wildcrafters on this Farm to Fork, Wyoming.
Funding for Farm to Fork, Wyoming is provided by Wyoming Community Bank, your locally owned community bank in Riverton and Lander, and on the web at www.wyocb.com, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The ancient art of wildcrafting is a journey back to our deepest roots in nature.
Some of the early explorers that had doctors on their expeditions, and most of them did, they would interview native people and specifically ask questions. So the question was asked frequently, how do you know all of these medicines in your environment? And one of the answers that happened several times was from the grizzly bear, our teacher. And it makes perfect sense because in the 70s and 80s when people started studying bear metabolism, it turns out that bears are almost identical to humans, not only in their metabolism and digestion, but in their food preferences in the wild.
It's the people of the land that live in the countryside that never lost it.
Wrapped in riddles and myth, people have carried plant wisdom through the ages.
There's these quizzes that as a little kid they say, what burns all around the house but doesn't burn the house? Nettles.
This is true nettle here. Stinging nettle.
People had nettles growing all around the house because they relied on it. So this is old stuff and it never really left.
For Native Americans, the thread of medicinal knowledge was woven deeply throughout tribal society.
And how that was done is different ways of remembering how to preserve medicines in these tribes. I'm learning that from talking to these elders who really are in touch with the pre-reservation ways of doing things. And some of the history that goes way back before the horse. There were specialists who were very, very good at discerning how to best prepare a medicine so that it was most effective. There wasn't one person in a village that was the doctor. There were people that spread out through the different ranks and social structures. Some were women with children, grandparents. There were warriors who knew certain types of medicine, and there were the storytellers who could go back and remember an epidemic in history that was many, many hundreds of generations away, and how they treated it.
Some fragments of old traditions are still familiar today.
In the street that I grew up, there was one or two midwives, or they weren't called midwives, they were just, Mrs. So-and-so that you called when you had a baby. And they knew what herbs to use and so forth, so they always had it. It was something that people grew up with that was passed on generation to generation. If you talk to the Indian elders here, and the elders way back in Europe, they land connected, they living with these plants, with these animals, or what their lives depended on it. So you're gonna be more interwoven. You're gonna look at these plants as not things. You're gonna look at them as things that have spirit.
But sadly, these connections are being broken with the passing of each generation.
There's one elder we've been interviewing quite a lot in Montana. Is the last storyteller who was raised to memorize things. His grandfather, who he grew up with, was born in 1847 before the reservations. So what he was taught was mostly the old knowledge. And his first language is Absoluki, Crow language. They know that when they die, some of their cultural knowledge that came down through hundreds and probably thousands of years is going to end. And they don't want to see it end. They're still holding out hope that this culture they grew up with can sustain somehow.
As these ancient threads struggle to remain, interest in herbal knowledge is seeing a revival across the broader society.
There's a herbal resurgence here, so more people are interested in it. There's more people that want to grow. There's more people that want to do this, become herbalists. When Carolyn and I started out, there were 2 places that you could study herbalism. Now there's herbal schools in every state, lots of them, so there's a boom in this.
And science has become a welcome part of this revival.
The science is a really important aspect of herbalism because we need to be able to speak multiple languages when it comes to herbs. Integrating new science with ancient wisdom, with that very idea, like, hey, this is stuff we already know. We're just putting science behind it as well, because both are important.
And modern research is revealing how Native American medicinals may be some of the most promising healers of the modern era.
That one and these are some of the primary roots that were used for medicine in the old days and still very effective. We're still learning about how to use these. This doesn't grow here, but it grows in Yellowstone and in eastern Wyoming around Saratoga, and it's called sweet root, and it's probably going to be the cure for type 2 diabetes very soon.
Today, plant experts share wildcrafting knowledge to preserve our connection to nature, nutrition, and health.
Yarrow occurs all over the globe.
Here is yarrow flower.
And it's the oldest recorded medicinal plant in the world, I think 8,000 or 9,000 years ago.
And these are its leaves. These will probably soon get stems and have flowers like that. And this is a really important blood stopper.
It was used all over the world, Central Asia, Europe, North America, South America. And it's always used for the same general purpose, which is to treat open bleeding wounds.
It's also a painkiller. And it also granulates tissue. So it's great for any kind of wound. It stops the bleeding and gets the healing process started and stops the pain.
There were specialized herb collectors that went out anticipating battle wounds, and they would collect yarrow wherever they were the day before a battle and store up big bags of it because it was the first aid remedy of the day.
Kids call it the Band-Aid leaves. You can chew them up and put them on a wound.
So we should put a little
Oh yeah,
scratch there.
yeah, that's ugly, isn't it?
That you shoved fresh into an open spear wound or an arrow wound.
You collect yarrow out here too?
Yeah, right back there on the other side of the culvert is a really good place.
Carolyn and I have been wildcrafting for, 30 years. And we always go back to the same spot, so you have to be really careful. You can't over-harvest.
Striking that balance between harvest and stewardship is key for all these wildcrafters.
This is all arnica.
Kind of a rhizomatous
It is.
plant?
It is rhizomatous, and so it just forms these mats. And you can see it's almost ubiquitous. It just almost covers the whole hill.
You have to know your area. You have to observe. You can't just go off and I'll take some of this, some of this.
Wind River Herbs has been harvesting this area for several years now.
You have to know whether this plant community is stressed out or if it's doing well, and then collect accordingly.
With some plants, like arnica, the medicinal parts can be harvested without destroying the rest of the plant.
And it's not necessary to dig it up because although you can use the roots for pain relief, you don't need to. You should probably just use the upper part of the plant.
We call it aerial, so basically the whole above ground part of the plant, including some of the root, which does have medicinal properties.
It's easier and quicker if you just break it off at ground level, and if you don't destroy the root, it'll come back again next year because this is a perennial plant.
But this is the time of year when it blooms, and then when it's gone, as far as the bloom goes. Unless you go higher, and then you can follow it. Yeah, you can follow it.
And it will make you a believer. You use it on sprains and strains, bruises, and it is amazing. And you just use it topically. Internally, it's toxic. Even on broken skin, it's toxic. But it is by far one of my favorite plants.
We pick it fresh, and within an hour, it's in the oil. The fresh is much better than the dried.
The dried is just so inferior. You might as well not.
It takes about 3 days for a batch, so right now we're just pretty much doing it every 3 days. We'll go up and get enough to fill all of our bins, and then we'll, filter it out, and then we can start a new batch. You just basically want to try to get whatever's in there into the oil. So we cut it up and wilt it, and then put it in the oil, warm it up a little bit, and that creates the great properties of the arnica oil.
And by following nature's ebb and flow, inventories can be replenished in times of abundance.
Like if some plants come up, like now we had all these forest fires, and what comes up there in the lodgepole area there is Corydalis. It's a plant that's really good for pain and anxiety problems. So the ground was just covered in it. So we have enough Corydalis for the next few years until the next fire, So go with the events in nature, with, what goes on.
And with powerful root medicines like Osha, the little goes a long way.
Really, one root that's like this big can last an entire family 2 or 3 years. So you can use a lot of caution and be conservative when you're harvesting these plants. There's no reason to overharvest.
Many plants, once preserved by drying salves or especially in tinctures, can have an astonishingly long shelf life.
Once it is tinctured, they stay good for 20, 30 years. I mean, we tasted a Valerian tincture at the pharmacy that was 100 years old and it was fine. Wow. So the ones that maybe lose a little bit are the ones that are made from delicate parts, maybe pulsatilla, the pasque flower. I wouldn't maybe use it past 5 years. So here we are making a fresh plant tincture. This herb is stinging nettle, and it does really sting. It bites. It has the formic acid. It bites kind of like an ant would bite you, so it hurts. Okay, this is a wonderful herb that people use for what is it called? For allergies, for arthritis. The nettle seed of it is used differently. It's used for kidney failure. And the root is used for enlarged prostate or prostate inflammation. So it's an all-around really good plant. Not all of the herbs lend themselves to be done fresh, but fresh you get that life force, you get that green in there, the essential oils that may be in it. Okay, so we add alcohol, 95% certified organic corn alcohol to that to pull out all the properties that are in there, all the good therapeutic ingredients, chemical ingredients. And when you make a fresh plant tincture, you will see how it's kind of like luminescent. Look at that color. So you can make a tincture out of a fresh plant or out of dried plants.
And while a wilderness is a prime source of medicinal plants, you don't always need to travel far.
Right in your backyard, you usually have a panacea of medicine. Dandelion grows in everybody's yard.
So dandelion is not a native plant, but it's everywhere. It's very medicinal. It was one of the chief medicinal plants of the Arabs and the Persians because it's native to Central Asia. So we can use it the same way they did as a liver tonic. The reason it was so important was anytime you were recovering from an illness, you needed to replenish the minerals that are in your liver, because when you're sick, you use them up making enzymes, which is the main function of trace minerals in the liver, is to make enzymes. They're cofactors. And they occur in plants, they occur in the soil in an unusable form for the most part. But plants absorb them and chelate them, and then we can use them. So if you're recovering from hepatitis or any kind of serious illness, you absolutely need to replace the trace minerals, which are copper, cobalt, zinc, manganese, chrome, and selenium. And you get them from dandelion root, because that's one of the traits of dandelion, is it concentrates those trace minerals. That's just one example of hundreds and hundreds of these plants that people have come to know how to use through trial and error.
So you can go right in your backyard and begin foraging and wildcrafting, even using the things that are growing in your garden instead of weeding them out and throwing them away. Bring them in as your winter medicines, dry them.
But there are important things to know about what you might be collecting.
I think one of the essences is really knowing, and I have to say this first and foremost, right? Really knowing what you're harvesting. So don't go out there being like, well, I think this is this, because there are plants that can kill you.
And here we have one that you don't want to make friends with. Yeah, you could confuse that with Osha, and you could confuse it with some of the other plants in that umbel family. This is a family, the umbel family, that has the best medicinal herbs. Wonderful vegetables, wonderful spices. And here in North America, the two most poisonous plants, the water hemlock and the poison hemlock. This one was water hemlock. You eat this, you go through convulsions, you throw up, you have horrible cramps, and you die a miserable death. And the water hemlock most often is confused with the wild carrot. But yeah, you just have to know what you're doing.
And plants like elephant head may be safe.
The elephant head is a really wonderful plant. It kind of relaxes you.
But if it is growing among toxic neighbors, it can be poisonous.
When we get to the elephant head, this is one of the things we cannot collect it next to.
Be really careful where it grows, because its roots are parasitic on the plants that it grows with. So if you find it growing next to like dwarf willow, that's really good, because willow has pain relieving properties in it. You don't want it growing next to death camas.
That is death camas, so it's got something bad in it. Killed the Indians, many of them, because they would be gathering onions and they'd get this instead, because it's the same family. And even if you smell it, when you pull it up, if you've been gathering onions, your fingers are going to smell like onions, and you're going to say, oh, that's fine. So see, here's an onion right next to the, so you're pulling onions and you pull that and you go, yeah, not.
You don't want it growing next to arrowgrass.
This is wonderful because here's the poison. The other poison, this is arrowgrass.
Huh.
This has cyanide in it. Those elephant heads would be poison, but cyanide is too close to them.
Wow. Boy, and that's
It's
so
really
subtle.
hard to see too.
Yeah.
And it looks a lot like plantain, so you can be confused. And if you get down to its base, you find that it has 3-sided leaves. It's thick and it's
Fat,
yeah.
round on one side and scooped out on the other.
right,
Kind of like the onion.
and looks a lot like plantain, but contains cyanide.
Are there other poisonous plants that grow around this?
There is one called ragweed.
Which is a senecio that has pyrrolizidine alkaloids in it, which destroy your liver.
It's got a yellow flower, tall.
So you got to know those plants that it grows with.
Okay, there's the poison, so we don't get any of those.
And then you collect from it. If you see a poisonous plant or a plant that isn't very good for you, you want to be at least a meter away from it.
There's the poison, there's the poison. These are okay.
You know, it's a big learning curve. The more you read, the more you try to understand what needs to be done and how how to complete the process.
And in communities like Atlantic City, Wyoming, friends get together to share their knowledge and the work of crafting.
Now since we live up here, it's more at our fingertips. I mean, we just walk out our door and, you know, we have all sorts of stuff. And then people like John and Jetta and everybody just have so much knowledge, and
we laugh. We laugh together, and if we think of something, we'll call that person up, and I said, wait a minute, I was reading this, or what shall we do? You know, we're a family.
So this is the cow parsnip oil, and it works on the nerves.
And the big things, of course, are important, and they mean a lot, but a lot of times the small medicines that have bigger potential, but you just use for small things, that's the important stuff too, because everybody is going to have a burn or a scrape.
The horsetail, of course, does your connective tissues.
They see all these things that are growing here, and they'll give you a call and say, what could I do for this?
The goal that you want is to help other people.
If they have a need, then it's nice to have it there for them. And some people like things enough that they begin making it for themselves, and they need a little direction to do that. It's kind of a community-supported activity.
And while plants grown in the wild might make better medicine, there is a need for cultivated medicinals as well.
But planting is good too in the garden, because you know where it is, you can go harvest it. This is the garden. We are looking at the organic garden, Aspen Grove Ranch Organic Garden. And anything on this ranch that we want certified, and we write down and we send in the papers. And that's the really exciting part of organic farming, is the paperwork.
Oh, right.
So anything that we want certified is certified.
Okay.
Because there's never been any herbicides or pesticides or fertilization on it. Okay, here's the woad. Also called Isatis. An excellent antibiotic, or antiviral. There's an herbalist called Stephen Buhner that's treating Lyme disease, and he uses this to treat the Lyme disease. So he put us in his book. So we got lots of orders for the stuff that he recommends. So this is one of the things we're trying to get a lot of that growing.
A native? Is
No.
this a native plant?
No.
So you've cultivated it.
Yeah, we planted it here. But it can take over because it makes a lot of seeds.
Yeah.
This is European mugwort, which is a sagebrush.
What's it good for?
They're using it in that fertilica formulas. So it's calming. That's the OSHA that actually froze and did its thing like it was supposed to.
Right.
This is how it should look after 3 years. And I think we'll be able to dig some of this, probably this row. I think this row got more sun, so the next time we plant OSHA, it's going to be in the middle where it gets a lot of sun. And this is lady's mantle, which we use in the formulas for the fertilica too.
And what's its properties?
It draws tissue together. This is hyssop. It's good for mucous membranes. So we put it in one of our formulas, our nose, throat, and lung formula. These are OSHA babies. These guys here are the baby OSHAs. These were planted last fall. That's a last year's one.
Oh.
It's already making seeds.
So what part of the plant is usable?
You can use the whole thing. For flavoring, you can use the seeds or the leaves. But the root is the one that we put in the medicine because that's the strongest.
Oh, okay. The medicine's concentrated in the root.
Yeah.
And the seeds, you actually, is a culinary thing?
Yeah, you could use them for that. They kind of like, like celery on steroids, maybe.
Oh, really? It doesn't have any adverse effect if you...
Oh, no. Eat it. You'll love it.
Oh, it is. It's super good. And what is this?
This is cow parsnip. This is another same family as the Osha. So the root you can use for Bell's palsy or other nerve damage. It has been used for that. The seeds are excellent for toothache and also as a digestive aid. This is Motherwort, which is good for heart palpitations.
Oh.
And it's another mint, a square stem. And then this is plantain. And we put that in our nose, lung, and throat formula too because it's really good for lungs. And this here is a Valerian.
And how do you
It smells
harvest
that.
this
This
one?
is the root. They use the root on this one, so we have to dig it.
In the future, I think we'll have more plants that are grown in the U.S. Probably 80% of what you get here comes from India and China, Eastern Europe. Then it gets sprayed or fumigated when it comes in the country. Is it organic or not? We don't know.
With the need for traceable, quality herbs, there's opportunities in growing plants suited to our regional climate and soils.
Because you can't wildcraft for, 2 million people. It's like, sorry,
Gardens like Caroline's demonstrate the potential for small farmers in the Rockies.
Take on maybe 1 or 2 herbs that they could grow, maybe some dandelion or maybe some lavender. Well, lavender not here, but maybe in the Sheridan area, Osha, or maybe the spike-owl skullcap. I mean, it grows here. And have a cooperative of small growers, and people will want more and more of this because this stuff really rocks.
This episode of Farm to Fork Wyoming is available for $25. Order online at shop.wyomingpbs.org. To learn more and watch Wyoming PBS programs online, visit us at wyomingpbs.org. This program was produced by Wyoming PBS, which is solely responsible for its content.